Hello and welcome to another one of our Ask the Expert sessions here on YouTube. And in this new season, we're going to talk about diesel questions because we have our upcoming diesel course that should be probably online by now or come out in the coming days. So go to BoatHowTo.com and check it out. Welcome, Nigel. We have a few more questions. So today we start with the first one. I have a 20-year-old DC generator consisting of a Yanmar 2GM driving two 24-volt, 140 amp Balmer alternators. When I laid up last winter, I changed the oil and fuel filters and filled the raw water cooling circuit with potable antifreeze. Now the engine fires up and runs fine at lower RPMs, but even without the alternator regulators turned on, it won't rev up to full speed. It vibrates and throws carbon out of the exhausts. What do you think is the problem? Well, what do you think, Nigel?
So it would be interesting to know where this is. I mean, first of all, it sounds like it's misfiring. That's why it's vibrating, and it's throwing carbon out the exhaust. And if it's throwing carbon out the exhaust, then we've got imperfect combustion. So it sounds like one or more of the injectors isn't atomizing the fuel properly. So it's not burning properly. So then we get the carbon. The question is why, because the boat was running fine before it was laid up, and it's been properly laid out, and now it's not. And the reason why I ask where this might be is because I know in England in particular, for example, they've been having a significant problem with what they call sticky diesel. It's to do with the processes that they use to take the sulfur out of diesel fuel. So we have ultra low sulfur diesel. There's a lot of chemistry involved here. It looks like, at least in the UK and possibly elsewhere, there are some reactions going on which, when you lay up the fuel for some length of time, results in some kind of sticky deposit. I don't think the chemistry is fully understood yet, but there's plenty of cases of this, including a friend of ours had exactly the same problem. It's a kind of gummy resin that jams the pistons in injection pumps and jams the pintles in injectors and screws up the injection process. And it's really difficult to fix it. Typically speaking, you have to take the components apart and clean them out. And I have a nasty feeling this may be what is going on here, in which case the fuel system needs an overhaul, and that's going to be probably more than that is worth if it's 20 years old with a couple of Balmer alternators on the back of it. So that's not what that person wants to hear, but I'm afraid that may be the situation.
I had probably a very similar phenomenon when I bought this boat. I mean, it had been laid up with full tanks for at least 4 years in hot Mediterranean climate. And I had like the super gummy deposit in the tanks at the bottom. Luckily,
Mhm.
my injectors are fine. I mean, the fuel system itself is fine, and I like ran it with a bunch of fresh fuel and fuel ride and all kind of biocides and stuff to make sure it's clean. But yeah, that stuff you definitely don't want to have anywhere in your injectors. It's like, I mean, without acetone, there was like no way to get this off the walls of my tanks.
That's it. You need some fairly powerful solvents to clean this up. And unfortunately, I'm not. Once you've got it, I'm not sure that there's any kind of solvent you can add to the fuel supply and flush it through the system because the pistons are basically one or more of those pistons or pintles is jammed in place.
What it comes down to is probably, yeah, make sure your fuel is fresh and yeah, you don't leave it around for many years, and also how like to properly treat it. I guess that's and ideally, if you can, try get fuel without bio components. I
So
think
let's talk about that briefly, Jan. I used to recommend that people fill the fuel tanks at the end of the season when they lay up, just to stop air movement in and out of the tank and condensation. Well, in practice, you get very little condensation. And now, given the problems we have with our fuel supply, I try to burn my fuel off every season and keep the tank almost empty. And then I can refill the next season, and I sample the tank from the very bottom of the tank before I crank the engine up to make sure there's no crap down there. So
mm.
I totally changed my layout procedures for fuel because of these problems we're having with the fuel supply.
And if you want to learn more about all of this, check out our diesel engine maintenance course because there we talk a lot about fuel hygiene, how to install sampling systems, what to do with this, how to properly treat fuel. So I think this is really worth checking out. The brand new course, we're actually pretty proud of it, and I think it's going to help a lot of people. See you next week for another season of Ask the Expert.